Earlier we spoke about setting New Year's resolutions and sticking to them. Let's now focus on how to set realistic financial goals for the new year. We are joined by co-founder and wealth manager at Imvelo Wealth Solutions, Palesa Tlholoe. Palesa, good afternoon and thank you so much for joining us and a happy new year to you. Now, quite often when we speak about financial goals, the first thing we think of is budgeting. How small an income can one have to start budgeting? Is there a specific amount of wealth or salary scales that one needs to be in order for them to just start the process of having to budget?
Good afternoon, Tlholoe. Good afternoon to your listeners as well. That is an interesting subject to attend, especially at this time of the year, Tlholoe. Very, very important and interesting as well at the same time. So, budgeting, right? As a concept, I think we often misunderstand it with basically having enough money. We think that for you to be able to budget, you need to have lots and lots and lots of money for whatever it is that you need. But I think what we need to understand is that budgeting is basically planning. It's as simple as that. It is planning with whether a little amount of money that you have or the big amount that you have, it doesn't matter. You just need to make sure that you take that amount of money and you basically dissect it into different parts and you then assign basically roles that this amount of money is going to be doing, and that's basically what it is. So it doesn't matter the amount of money that you have. What's important from then is once you've assigned the roles for these bits and pieces of your money, then you get to a point where you can see whether you've got enough or you don't have enough. And budgeting then allows you to at least then go back to the goals that you may have to see if those goals then are real, are they attainable, or are they not attainable? And then, of course, allows you to make certain changes if you need to make changes.
So is there a certain rule of thumb with regards to a percentage of your salary that you need to budget every single month?
Not necessarily, Tlholoe, not necessarily. It depends. I mean, there's different rules of thumb that we use as financial experts, if I may put it like that. There's different rules of thumb. One of the ones that I really like the most is the one called the 50-30-20 rule. In the internet, you'll see it says 50-20-30. I call it 50-30-20. And basically, with that, I just say that 50% of your income will go to your life's necessities, 30% of it must go to your savings and investments, and then 20% of it can go to your wants. That's a simplified version. Other people would look at it differently, and they would say 30% of it will go to your needs and your wants, and then 10%, rather the balance of it, which will be 20% of it, will then, 30% of it will then go to entertainment and things like that. So it depends. I mean, there's many rules. There's another one called a zero balance, where you basically budget, or rather zero budgeting method, where you use pretty much, or you allocate pretty much every single cent of your salary to something. It works for some people. It doesn't work for some things. For some people, try different ones and see what works for you. But yeah, it is always, and I encourage people to always have at least a certain rule of thumb that you follow to see how far you can stretch your money.
Earlier on, you spoke of this process being about planning. And with planning, there are different stages. There's the immediate, there's the medium term, and there's the long term. How do you know where your goals need to go in with regards to the different stages, whether this goal would sit within my immediate goals or within my long-term goals?
I think firstly, Tlholoe, let's start with basically saying we do need to understand that money is similar to, if I may use an analogy of fitness, for instance. At the beginning of the year, most of us will say, I'm going to try and lose weight, I'm going to eat healthy and what have you. And there are certain habits that you then have to follow if you then decide that you want to lose weight, for instance. And those habits are not habits that you will only look at on a, let's say, weekly basis or a monthly basis. You sort of need to break them break them down to a daily habit, right? To make sure that you then at the end of the month, if you've created for yourself a monthly goal, then for you to be able to see that at the end of the month you've achieved that goal. So money is the same as well. You need to sort of break it down. You may have a 5-year term goal, but it doesn't mean that you will only attend to it when you get to that year, 5th year, right? You start now. You break it down. It is a 5-year goal, but you break it down to a yearly goal. You break it down to a monthly goal. You break it down to a weekly goal, and you break it down to a daily goal. And it is those daily habits that you will follow that will ensure that you get to that 5-year plan, right? And also then that 5-year plan, or rather your plans, will also tell you whether your plan is immediate. Is it a medium-term goal? Which means if it's a medium-term goal, it's about a 2 to 3 year goal. If it's a long-term goal, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. It will determine the type of goal that you have will determine how many years you need to plan it for. And once you then are clear on how long you need to put this plan together, or your finances perhaps will be the one that determine whether this goal is going to be a long-term, a medium-term, or a short-term. And whatever the time frame that you need to follow, you just need to make sure that you then break it down to something that is more attainable. Hence, I mentioned daily goals. So if it's a daily goal, or rather daily habits, if it's a daily habit, then you know that you're not supposed to do certain things, or there are certain things that you need to do on a daily basis to make sure that you get to that, whatever the term is. You are able to get to it if you've broken it down. And also, you are able to ascertain whether you're not going to be able to get to that goal if you can see that you maybe have derailed. So let's say you have set it up to say that on a weekly basis, I'm going to make sure that I don't eat at the tech shop, as an example, at work. So if you know that by the end of that day, or by the end of that week, you've used already, let's say 100 Rand or 500 Rand that you were not supposed to use, that was supposed to go towards your goal, as much as you've only used that in that week, you already know that you are behind for that monthly goal. So what are the plans, or what are some of the action items that you're going to put in place to make sure that towards the end of the month, because now you've messed up your goal during this week, you've done something that was out of the habits that you were supposed to follow. How do you recover from that such that that doesn't affect the next month? Because if it affects the next month, it will affect the year, and it will affect your entire 5-year plan. So
it's a ripple effect from those small daily activities and habits that rather seep into our monthly habits, as well as the goals for the rest of the year. For a lot of people, paying off debt is a dream, and making sure that you are debt-free is something that a lot of South Africans want to work towards. What would you suggest are the best strategies with regards to starting to paying off debt?
Look, once again, Tlholoe, there are different strategies that people will follow. They talk about the snowballing goal, rather not goal, but the snowball plan that you can use, where you break down your debts, and you, for instance, decide that this is the type of debt that I'm going to pay first, or I'm going to pay that debt first. You know, whatever strategy you use, once again, the important thing is to put all of them down when it comes to debt management. Put all your debts down. Maybe even get to a point where you know clearly what percentage of interest you are paying on each and every one of them, and then decide, are you going to start with the small one first, or are you going to start with the big one first? So again, depends from person to person. But what I see the most, what I see mostly is that what affects a lot of people is the fact that they add debt on top of the debt. So whatever strategy you are following, if you are still continuing to add more onto the debt that you have, it maybe will not get you to where you're trying to get to. So maybe the important thing is to perhaps look at what are some of the things that you find yourself doing often that creates, or that puts you in a position where you're having to go and borrow more and more and more. Because I mean, it doesn't help if you're busy trying to reduce your debt by paying more towards it, but at the same time, you're adding another debt on the side. So it's more like borrowing from Palesa in order to pay Imvelo as an example. So it doesn't really help because you're still creating more and more debt. So what are some of those things? You need to identify those things that keep you in that loop and try and work on them and get rid of them. So, for example, what we see, for instance, at least with the clients that I have, what I see often happens is that because they don't have any savings and they don't have any emergency funds, they find themselves having to go into their credit cards every now and then. They have to go into their credit cards to pay for certain expenses. And so because of that, then their debt keeps piling up. It doesn't go down. And so the question is there something that you can do to create yourself an emergency fund? Because the first thing that's important is to acknowledge and to recognize that emergencies will happen. Life will happen, and it will happen pretty much all the time. So how do you make sure that you've got a kitty somewhere that you can run to when you've got those emergencies? And emergencies could be someone has passed away unexpectedly. Your geyser has passed. You ran your tap and you forgot to switch it off, and suddenly you've got your house is flooding. And there's many other things, and those are the dramatic ones that I'm mentioning. There are some that are not even that dramatic. Some of those examples could be you end up going to a party that you didn't plan to go to, a birthday party that you didn't plan to go to, and suddenly you've spent 1,000 rands on a gift that you don't have. How do you make sure that you recover from something like that? I know that it's a silly example, but it happens, right?
It does.
It happens that you're spending 2,000 rands, 3,000 rands that you didn't plan to. So the important thing then is to go back to your budget and look at these things that I keep having to pay money for. Are they really emergencies that I cannot plan for? Can I not put and set aside something so that if these things happen, then I've got somewhere to run to so I don't have to go to my credit card, pay for these things, and so then I'm able to get to my goals because then I'm not disturbing the bigger plan and I'm not adding more to my debt, and I am sticking to the strategy that I have selected to go with.
All right. Thank you so much for that contribution. I hope this is definitely going to be a year of 2020 debt-free for a lot of South Africans in ensuring that we pay off most of our debt and we're able to save and have that emergency fund. Thank you so much for all that advice this afternoon. That's co-founder and wealth manager at Imvelo Wealth Solutions, Palesa Tlholoe.